Share. Okay, you should all be seeing the intro slide for the role of LAFCo. And if not, please someone let me know because technology is funky. Okay, great, thank you. All right, so we are Humboldt LAFCo. We also work for PlanWest Partners. We provide staffing services to several LAFCos in the Northern California region. To let you know what we're going to be talking about today, we have a little outline here. So first of all, we're going to go over what is LAFCo, because a lot of people don't know, and then why we have them in every county. We'll talk about our mission, roles, and functions, how we're funded, and then we'll start getting into more of the details about what it is we actually do. So our municipal service reviews, which are very important planning documents that we conduct on a regular basis, the spheres of influence for cities and special districts. And we're also going to go over formations and other types of boundary changes. So annexations, detachments, extension of services, all those things that you might be applying to LAFCo for at some point in time. And to give you a better idea of what those are, we have a few case studies that we'll go through. And then to wrap it all up, we'll talk about what LAFCo can do for you, because ultimately we are here to help. We want to spread our knowledge and help our cities and special districts as much as we can. Now, before we dig in, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are coming to you live from the ancestral lands of the Wiyot people on the shores of Humboldt Bay. And you can see from this map here that in Northern California, there are a lot of different tribes. It's a very diverse region. And if you haven't seen this map before, it's a wonderful tool. You can access it online using the QR code here or through this website, native-land.ca. And this will pull up territories for all sorts of different tribes, not only in North America, but also in Australia, lots of South America, parts of Africa, and even Northern Europe. It also has some special functions where it talks about the languages and different historical treaties pertaining to tribes. Now, we've been starting to put these into our municipal service reviews as a way to acknowledge how the land was originally used, and then we go in and talk about the different land uses for our districts and cities. Okay, let's dive in. So what the heck is LAFCo? Well, it's the Local Agency Formation Commission. It's a little bit easier to just say LAFCo. So there is one in every county, as was stated earlier, and our primary responsibility is to oversee boundary changes and extensions of service. But we also do a bunch of other things too, like conducting the regular reviews of cities and special districts that I talked about, which is the municipal service reviews. And we'll get into those a little bit more detail a little bit further on here. And here we have an example of what an annexation is. So we are taking another chunk of land and adding it to the original boundary so that we get a new one. That is something that we oversee. So why do we even have LAFCo? What's the point? How did this come about? Well, this is from the post-World War II population and housing boom that happened. You know, we always hear about the baby boom period. And it really led to a rapid increase in our population and demand for services. So in this time frame, we saw a lot of urban sprawl, large areas of land that were being converted from either farmland or open space into different housing developments, very car-centric neighborhoods. You have to drive far away sometimes from the city center where you get a lot of different services. And it led to a lot of overlapping of services and funky boundaries and these annexation wars. So you'd have a water district saying, oh, we'll serve this street, and then another one comes in, it's like, oh no, we want this street down here, and just really overlapping. It got really messy. And so LAFCo was started to help guide that process and create more logical boundaries, and also to help protect our open space and agricultural land from potentially unnecessary conversion. Now, for anybody who's interested in the legal side of things, we are overseen by the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Local Government Reorganization Act of 2000. And to shorten that up, we just call it the CKH Act. So that's our primary document that we go to for all of our rules. So it provides regulations for who is on the commission and what is included in the MSRs and the SOIs. And also details what you need in order to do these different changes of organization. So all the different application materials are outlined there. Now, this document is reviewed and updated on a regular basis, and the California Association of LAFCos, CalLAFCo, provides an updated guideline every year, and that can be found on their website, which you can access through this QR code, or if you just Google up CalLAFCo. Sometimes you have to be a little bit more specific because I think there is a candle company that's also called LAFCo based out of New York. So sometimes you actually have to type it out, but that'll get you where you need to go so you can get some more information. So to talk a little bit more about our mission and our composition, as I stated earlier, we're really looking to foster that orderly growth and development. We're looking for those logical boundaries and promoting the efficient delivery of services. So this oftentimes means going more towards infill projects rather than annexing lands on the outside of districts or areas. You know, we want to try and look for those infill projects first because it's a little bit better for services. But if you need to annex a new area, you need to annex a new area. But we just want to make sure that we're looking at it in detail first before it gets approved. Now, LAFCo is typically made up of representatives from each county, the cities in the county, any special districts that exist there, and also public members. So we have a really good mix of representation. There are some cases where a county doesn't have any cities, and then there's also some cases where a county doesn't have any special district representation. Now, those different types of compositions are detailed in the CKH Act. They just have a little bit, special circumstances going with them, but it is possible. To give you an idea of the different agencies that we interact with on a regular basis, these are the agencies that we have in Humboldt County. So there are 7 cities: Arcata, Blue Lake, Eureka, Ferndale, Fortuna, Rio Dell, and Trinidad. But then we have 53 special districts. And holy cow, is that a lot of districts, especially when you're trying to go through all of these different municipal service reviews. So we have community services districts, fire protection, recreation, different types of water districts, cemetery, county service areas, healthcare, and sanitation. Oh, that's a lot of different types of services, but we go through and we try and keep up to date on all of them and conduct our regular reviews, make sure that everyone is functioning as well as they can. Now, there are other counties, like in Trinity County, where you don't have any cities and there are a limited number of districts. So it varies. And then down in Southern California, you have a whole lot of cities and a whole lot of special districts. There's just a lot more that goes into it. So every LAFCo is different. So we'll talk about our different hats that we wear. So we are a regulatory agency, but we're also a planning agency. So we establish those spheres of influence, which Colette will talk about a little bit later. We conduct municipal service reviews, and we really try and work together with everyone to ensure that there are adequate services being provided to all of our communities. So we do a lot of meetings with different districts. Can we try and provide some better services here, or maybe we can hook you up with a good information person over here? And we're really trying to work on that cooperation so that we can work as smoothly as possible. And then we are a regulatory agency. That's our other hat. So we oversee modifications to our existing agencies, all the different boundary changes, extension of services, activation of latent powers. So if a district or city needs to start providing wastewater service, and that's something they haven't done before, they would go through us to legally activate that power so that they can provide it to their community. Now, it should be noted that LAFCo cannot directly regulate land use. That is still within the powers of the county and the different cities that oversee the area. So that is something that we will not tell you how to use the land. It's important. All right, moving on. How LAFCo is funded? Well, it's typically funded equal thirds between the different members, so the counties, the cities, and the special districts. As I mentioned before, there are some cases where you don't have those three different representations. So it'll be split 50-50 if there are no cities and just special districts in the county, or 50-50 between the cities and the county, and so on. I think there is one case where it's just the county. I think that's Alpine County LAFCo. It's just the county because they don't have currently any special district representation. But I believe that's going to change. Our applications that we do, so anytime you submit for a boundary change or an extension of service, that is typically 100% cost recovery. So we are going to be billing the applicant, whether that's the city or a special district, or sometimes the landowners directly if they're petitioning for something. So they're going to be directly billed for all of the time and materials that it takes to go through that process. And then just like any other public agency, we are responsible for preparing and adopting an annual budget for every fiscal year. All right, I think that's all of the background. So now we can get into the municipal service reviews. This is one of my favorite things that we do at LAFCo. It's really interesting. So what we do is we look at all of the different agencies, whether it's the healthcare district or sanitation, water, parks and recreation. We take a look at that district and we learn as much as we can about it. So these MSRs are good places to provide highlights, such as projects or plans or other accomplishments that the agency has done recently. It's also going to talk about the adequacy of the public services. So, is there enough water to support the demand of the community that they're serving? Is there enough parks and recreation opportunities, or does it seem like there's a higher demand for more of that type of service? So we'll look at that. We're also going to be looking at any infrastructure needs or deficiencies, the financial ability of the agency to provide the service. So are they able to provide enough funding to cover their expenses and hopefully build up reserves, or are they struggling a little bit, and do we need to potentially recommend some different funding mechanisms to help them start building up those reserves again? We also look at opportunities for shared facilities and services. So sometimes, especially in Humboldt County, we have a lot of little water districts, and sometimes they can share different types of services, and that really helps promote efficiency and keeps rates down for their customers. And then we also look at the accountability for community needs. So what this is looking at the transparency. So we want to make sure that these public agencies are easily accessible by the public, and that they're providing information and can easily be understood so that the people they're serving know what's going on. These documents can be used for a lot of different things. They must be prepared either before or with a sphere of influence update. They can really help build an agency's record. So we try and go through and find all the source documents, the resolutions that form the district, any activation of powers, that sort of thing, and put it all in one place so it's easy to understand, and you can hand it to someone and be like, here's everything you need to know about our district. That's really what we strive for. It's a great tool for new governing members or staff that come into the district. And it can also be used to highlight needs and projects that are potential candidates for grant funding. Sometimes a grant application will ask if the project has been noted in any planning documents, and you can say, yes, here it is in this MSR that we prepared. That's a great tool. think that is it for me. I've babbled on long enough, and we're going to go into spheres of influence. So I'll let Colette take it over from here.
Great. Well, thanks for the overview. So yeah, as Krystle said, a lot of our time and efforts go into municipal service reviews and spheres of influence. And the sphere of influence is really it's a boundary that is a LAFCo approved and adopted boundary for each city and special district in the county. And it really looks to establishing the eventual or probable physical boundary for that agency and their ultimate service area. So typically, and that's really goes back to the service reviews. So as Krystle was saying, we prepare and we adopt the spheres of influence as part of the service reviews, because in order to really establish the sphere, we're looking at what services are being provided, where the demand for services is, and where potential extension of services would be in the future. And we look at the population, we look at infrastructure and demand for services. So there's some instances where we establish, and I'll go into the different types of spheres, but we identify that a sphere is coterminous with an agency boundary, that there's really no change to their service area that we anticipate. And then sometimes we look to, there's possibly a neighborhood or pocket outside of the service district that could receive services in the near future. They're close enough to existing infrastructure, and that's where we would look to an expanded sphere. Or maybe in some instances, they're already connected to a service district, but not within the boundary. And so we want to make sure the sphere of influence includes that area, and we document the extension of services and existing services. The sphere of influence in the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act notes that spheres must be updated every 5 years or as necessary. And so we really try to stick to the 5 to 10 year time frame for our spheres of influence and municipal service reviews, just with the amount of agencies we have. And so the spheres, like I said, we do make determinations with regard to present and planned land uses in the area, the probable, present and probable need for public facilities and services, the capacity of providing those services, and then any social or economic communities of interest that are near or adjacent to the agency. So this really informs how we look to either maintaining or expanding the sphere for agencies. And I think Krystle, there you go. She has controls. So again, this is kind of the different types of spheres. So we have coterminous spheres of influence, which are the same as the district boundary. That tells us within the next 5 to 10 years, we don't see any annexations anticipated. Expanded spheres of influence are those that go beyond the district boundary. And so we're indicating there that there's a potential for annexation in the near future or extension of services. A reduced sphere of influence more or less indicates that there can be a detachment of a service boundary, or that, in some instances, no services are being provided in an area, or maybe there's a overlap with another agency that's providing services. So we might show a reduced sphere for one agency, so there's no overlapping service boundaries. And then in limited instances, but it can occur, a zero sphere of influence indicates that we determine that an agency should be dissolved. And that, so the sphere of influence represents that. The figure here on the screen is one we did just in the last couple of years for the Jacoby Creek County Water District, which straddles the city of Arcata. The district was formed in order to construct a community water system. They received a loan, and years back in, I think in the 60s, they constructed that community water system. And then they have an agreement with the city of Arcata to help with the administrative functions, billing, and the sorts. So there's this relationship between the county water district and the city of Arcata. And so we did both the city's municipal service review and the water district service review around the same time, really looking at the overlapping spheres and kind of the relationship. So you'll see here, the city of Arcata sphere, we did expand in the Sunnybrae area some to include parcels that are currently served that are outside of the boundary. And then we also reduced Jacoby Creek County Water District sphere substantially in an area that is all timberland and wouldn't receive water services due to the land use designations and zoning. So that's kind of an example where we're looking at not only districts, but adjacent agencies as well, and looking at any duplication or overlapping spheres. And so with boundary changes, this is kind of the regulatory side Krystle was talking about. So LAFCo oversees annexations, detachments, formations of new districts, in certain instances, not very common, but incorporations of cities. That would also require LAFCo review and approval. So the annexation is expanding a service area or adding land to a district. And so a lot of times the annexations occur with new development. Sometimes, it's related to an individual service request. And so the scale of annexations can really, they can be a single parcel to a larger area and neighborhood. Detachments aren't as common, but a lot of times detachments occur if there's any change in service. So for instance, we we oversaw or processed a detachment application that was taking territory from one fire district, and a adjacent fire district was annexing that. So we were doing a concurrent annexation detachment at the same time, and really just cleaning up the service area of those two agencies, just based on determination that one agency could, respond quicker, just based on the location of stations and roads and that sort of thing, that they were able to respond quicker. So we did an annexation and a detachment from one to the other. And then in some instances, we do extensions of services, authorizations that aren't associated with an annexation. And so this is a section of the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act that is very specific, allows for extensions and water or wastewater connections, largely based on a need, like a health and safety need. And in some instances, they will be followed with annexation, and in some instances, it's deemed not feasible to annex, but the service is still required. And here's some other types of, and I won't go through all of these in detail, but consolidations are a type of boundary change between agencies. We really see this with fire districts. We're processing consolidations and providing technical assistance to fire agencies in Humboldt, and really trying to identify where there can be where agencies are already really working together, responding together, but we can really formalize that service relationship, and in many instances extend a existing parcel tax that one fire district has to a larger area and generate revenue to sustain the service. So consolidation is a tool for that. And reorganization, it's a little confusing, but sometimes we'll have one fire district that annexes and one that dissolves. And so you have like this coupling of different types of changes of organization. And when we have two or more changes of organization, it's considered a reorganization. Kind of complex, but and then activation of powers is another one we'll see when a district wants to provide a new service. So we have the instance in Willow Creek here in Humboldt County that they've been working for years on establishing a wastewater treatment for their downtown area, and they've received grants and they've done all the environmental and all the construction plans, and they're this close to constructing that system. And before they do, they'll be coming to LAFCo to get approval of the activation of providing that wastewater service. And as part of any application, where especially with the activation of powers, we're looking at can an agency or does an agency have sufficient revenue to fund the service? And so a plan for services, which we'll go through in a minute, the plan for services is really important. But we want to see that with any of these applications, especially with the formations and the activation of powers. So here's just a very general list of what we require for applications. So we like to meet with applicants or agencies early on in the process. And so please reach out early on when you have questions or starting to think about applying to LAFCo. And just we like to sit and like look through where the existing sphere is. Does it include the area? Will a sphere of influence amendment be needed? And what just our general policies allow. But so for, let's say it's an annexation application, we have our typical application form. We typically encourage annexations and any different applications to be submitted by the service provider. So that would be through resolution of application. There are provisions for either registered voter or landowner petitions directly to LAFCo, and so therefore, a landowner applying directly to LAFCo, but we really encourage that the landowner first go to their service provider, work with staff, and receive board approval for the service, and then have the service provider apply by resolution to LAFCo. So we're working with the service provider in all instances and keeping the landowners informed. And the process is expedited if there is 100% landowner consent. So that's where it's really important for the agency to be working with the landowners and getting and trying to get consent for the application. The plan for services is an important component of the overall application. And I think we have a slide on that, so I'll kind of hold off on describing the plan for services in more detail. And then we require any maps of what's being annexed and the application fee as well. So here's the slide for plan for services. So this is required for all applications to LAFCo, and it includes information regarding the level and range for services, when services would be extended or provided, whether there would be any necessary infrastructure improvements to serve the affected territory, the cost, and any funding mechanisms or funding that would be required or need to be levied to fund the service, and any other information regarding governance as well. So it's just, again, providing really detailed information about how services will be provided, the timing, the infrastructure, and the funding. So all of those things that LAFCo, we like to inform our commission prior to them making a decision. So I'll go into some case studies. And just to know, since we're getting kind of far enough along, there is, I think, a Q&A or a chat feature. So if you do have any questions over the next 5 or so minutes, please drop them in, and then we can circle back to that at the very end. So I'm going to go through a couple case studies. So Peninsula Community Services District was recently formed in the last few years, and this was a decades-long process. The peninsula was served by the Peninsula Fire Protection District, Samoa Peninsula Volunteer Fire Department, all volunteer department, and in the town of Samoa is an existing community, very unique in that it was owned. It was one of the last, or probably last, company-owned timber towns, and so this one was where the owner was planning to subdivide all the existing houses in the town, as well as developing new residential and commercial development. And so it was all a phased subdivision that first went to the county for approval. And then once they received approval for their subdivision and tentative map, then they applied to LAFCo for annexation. And that's actually a really important thing that I don't really know if I conveyed through the previous slides, is kind of the timing for annexations. We always want to see if there's any discretionary approvals by the county for subdivision or for any land use entitlements, that goes to, that happens first, and that all those entitlements happen prior to submitting an application to LAFCo. So in this instance, that's exactly what happened. And they prepared a comprehensive services study. And what happened was the fire protection district was reorganized to a community services district in order to fund all of the new services that would need to be provided. So going from a private water supplier to a community water and community wastewater. And so they not only received LAFCo approval for this reorganization, which was dissolution of the fire protection district and concurrent formation of the CSD. They also, this application was conditioned by LAFCo to also receive voter confirmation for the formation, as well as assessments and other funding necessary to provide the services for the town. So this is the list of all the different services that the CSD was authorized to provide. And in the last few years, they've been working to not only approve all of the different funding mechanisms like the Prop 218 assessments and fee structures for water and wastewater, but start looking at staffing and hiring and developing. The subdivider or the developer is working on constructing the water and wastewater systems, and as part of the phase subdivision will be replacing a lot of the existing infrastructure and developing that with new infrastructure. So it's going to be a phased and long process, but ultimately new infrastructure in the town, new development, and a new service provider. Oh, and here's a map. That's right. I included this in there. So this shows the town of Samoa more towards the north. And then Fairhaven and Finntown are also in the in the district's boundary. And so the town of Samoa is where the water, wastewater, the range of services are going to be provided, and Fairhaven is more focused fire protection, and they're still on site water and wastewater services, which may change. Wastewater may be extended there in the near future. All right, here's this next case study. Rio Dell Fire Protection District did an annexation, which it was more or less a consolidation. So they annexed a large area that was existingly served by 3 volunteer fire companies that were not special districts. They were volunteer fire companies. And so this was several years in the making as well. Rio Dell and these volunteer fire companies were working really closely together, training together, and responding to calls together. And so they determined that there's cost savings, as well as just addressing the need for a formal funding mechanism for providing services in these communities. So they going from companies that are only supported by community donations and bake sales, to having an assessment in place that can fund services on a continual basis and really a sustainable funding source. So Rio Dell was identified as the entity that had an assessment in place, and by annexing, they were able to extend their existing assessment to the annexation area. And so we worked really closely with them to develop that, like a new budget for this consolidated district that showed, the battalions, these new battalions that cover these communities, and really identify, the staffing and the changes to the department, and operationally and administratively, once the annexation happened. And I think I have a map as well for this one. So this boundary really extended along the Avenue of the Giants, from Rio Dell to include Scotia Shively, Red Crest, and so there you go. Yep, thanks, Crystal. Here's a quick case study, time check. We're still doing pretty well. We'll be wrapping this up soon and then going to questions. So I talked a little bit about service extensions earlier. A lot of times those are related to a health and safety need. And so this has happened a couple of times in the city of Arcata, where just right outside the city's boundary, a resident's septic system failed. And they determined that, a sewer line went right in front of their property or nearby. And so they were able to connect without, substantial infrastructure expansion. And so we were able to process a out of city or out of agency services extension. And we have our policy allows for the executive officer and the health and safety, when there's a health and safety need, to approve the service extension. And we notify the commission when that happens, and have a 10-day period where the commission can appeal as necessary. But this is one where We approved the health and safety extension, and then the city followed up within a year of approval with annexation of that parcel. And so this is just an example, but service extensions can be common especially for these septic failures. And then here's another fire district example. We do there's a lot of need, and we've been working really closely with fire related districts, both fire districts and community service districts that provide fire protection. We've, in some instances, like the Rio Dell case, really, instead of forming a new fire district for those volunteer fire companies, we really are, trying to work to identify, opportunities for consolidation. So we're not forming more and more and more fire districts, all with similar needs. And, so we did in Fruitland's case, just because of where they're located, form a fire protection district. And with that, they established a special tax that was a condition of approval. So again, tying the need for a sustainable revenue source to the formation application. So this one was initiated because it's a formation. It was initiated by landowner petition. They, went out to the community, collected signatures for the formation. It then went to LAFCo to approve. We conditioned the approval based on the special tax, receiving sufficient voter support for the special tax. This one actually came to LAFCo twice, because the first time they came to us, they then went to election and they did not receive sufficient voter support. It was one vote that they didn't get. And so they didn't get the 2/3 voter approval. So we did not approve the formation. It was terminated. And then a few years later, they came back to LAFCo, redid the process, really. And this is a testament for just how important community outreach is. They did a fabulous job informing everyone, and not only received the commission support for the formation, but also really strong community support for the special tax. So there's been several, this is just one example, there's been several fire district formations that we've processed over the years. We're also going to be soon processing another formation in the Salmon Creek area of southern Humboldt, and also a large annexation that's also a consolidation for Garberville. So those are going to be coming soon to the commission for consideration. All right, and so we'll just wrap this up by, what LAFCo can do for you. Krystle did explained, the service reviews are a great resource, not only for the service providers and the service districts and the agencies that we're working with closely on, but also for the public. So we publish those on our website, and they really are a great tool. But we also get lots of calls just with regard to providing, guidance on the LAFCo process. We meet with agencies and do pre-application consultations. We also, just anything we can do to help move forward these applications, we're available. We can do we have GIS in-house. So boundary mapping, we have a lot of special district resources. We're members of the California Special Districts Association, so we can really help develop or find resources as needed. Yeah, we have lots of contacts at the statewide level, regional level. So we're here to help. A lot of times we get calls just, do you have our formation documents? So we are submitting a grant, like we need help us. Like we're here to help. So give us a call. And just coordination efforts in general. When it comes to the service needs, sometimes these are very complex, and it's not always you know, it can sometimes be, you know, controversial or, you know, just needing to work out the logistics and specifics between different service providers and the members of the public. So we are here to meet with, you know, different stakeholders and agencies and the county, and, you know, just act as a facilitator in some instances. And that's where the beauty of LAFCo really comes is ultimately a lot of that is worked out through the application process, even before we bring it to the commission. And so that's our staff role, is to work really closely with agencies to address all those needs and try to work it out before public hearing. And additional resources. So we spoke of LAFCo. They're really a wealth of knowledge and resources for all things LAFCo. They track legislative items that, you know, we watch that affect special districts or LAFCos. And then the California Special Districts Association, same thing. They have a legislative team advocating for special districts at the state level. So great resource. And special districts can become members of the CSDA, and we really encourage that. And that's it. So I think we have some questions. Let's see. So Stephen, you asked, can you describe how districts are funded? So districts can be funded. I can take this one. Districts are funded in multiple ways. Water and wastewater services are enterprise services. So they are funded by rates and fees, which is a section in Prop 218. So rates and fees can be increased over time, established or increased through that Prop 218 process. Fire protection is also a different section of Prop 218, and those can be done by assessment or through a special tax. And so the main difference between assessment or special tax is the type of vote. And so assessment is majority landowner approval, whereas a special tax is 2/3 voter approval. So, and then property taxes is another important funding for agencies, and that is very complex, but those agencies that were formed and levying property taxes before Prop 13 continue to levy property taxes, and that's all through the AB8 factor. And so those that were formed after Prop 218 or Prop 13, or maybe weren't levying at that time, don't have property taxes per se, and would need to go through a property tax exchange negotiation prior to being able to levy that. And that's a complex process. So I won't get into it, but it is something that we deal with through the application process. And let me know, Stephen, if I responded, you know, if you have any follow-ups there.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay. Another question is, who pays for service reviews? And service reviews are part of the overall LAFCo budget that is funded in equal thirds by the county, the cities, and the special districts. And just some LAFCos, it's different for every LAFCo. Some LAFCos contract out for their service reviews. They don't do it in-house, and others do it, you know, in-house by their contracted or full-time staff. And so for Humboldt LAFCo and the other LAFCos that Plan West provides staffing services to, you know, we do those municipal service reviews in-house. And then we have another question, can LAFCo impose conditions on projects? That's a great question. And yeah, we didn't cover that too well, but yes, LAFCo does, and it has the ability to condition. impose conditions on annexations or formations, and we do. So with regard to the formations, we will most often condition that the formation will be approved only if that special tax is supported by the the special tax is approved by registered voters. And so that's an important condition. Sometimes we will condition, I'm trying to think of other, kind of, we have our regular conditions, that, protest proceedings will be, which we didn't go into, but there's a whole protest proceeding after commission approval, so that will be complete, and that all fees will be paid. Sometimes we will require a memorandum of agreement or understanding if there's some additional coordination that may need to be addressed between service providers that came up during the hearing. But typically we try to get all of that worked out in advance. So really the conditions relate to any subsequent funding or revenue approvals that are needed in some instances. And are there any other questions?
That looks like it. So on behalf, excuse me, on behalf of the APA Northern Section and AEP's San Francisco section, I would like to really thank our two presenters today. Again, LAFCo is a pretty important function in every county, and we're really glad to have an update on how it works so we better understand how to make use of that. And stay tuned for next month's program with Ross Chapin on housing, and we will see you again. Thank you all for tuning into this broadcast. It has been recorded, and you'll be receiving a link how you can download it from the cloud if you wish to show it to other people. Thank you again. Thanks again to our speakers.
Thank
Goodbye,
you.
everybody.
Have a great day. Bye.